Hello, everyone, and welcome into Coach Craig's Sports. This is going to be my live stream for the Thursday night football game between the New Orleans Saints and the Arizona Cardinals. I'm doing this stream, about 3.5 hours earlier than I typically would. So I do apologize to anyone that did affect. But if you're not able to make it during the live stream and ask some questions, you can always watch the replay and feel free to reach out on Twitter at Coach Craig Sport and ask me some questions as well. But what I typically do during these live streams is I'll go through the inactives, kind of talk through them, and then we'll go through and build a couple lineups, go through kind of the pricing of different players for the slate overall, and kind of go over some of the ownership brought to which I am pulling from runthesims.com. I pulled that a little bit earlier today. There might be some ownership that is a little bit different throughout the day, though, because right now I'm still seeing James Conner projected about 6% in the captain spot, and I don't think he's going to end up playing tonight. Speaking of which, I think I'm just going to bring up the injury report real quick, because that will be one thing to look at since we don't have the inactives for today. So I'm going to pull that up real quick. I don't think anybody's in here yet, but at this point in time, I'm just going to pull that up, and that's why there is a moment of silence. So bringing this up, and I got to unshare this, and then we'll reshare that. So we're going to share the tab for the injury report. So this is the Cardinals injury report. It actually has both teams listed on it. So in terms of the injuries for this game, we got Marquise Brown is out with a foot injury. He's expected to miss at least 6 weeks at this point in time. James Conner dealing with his rib issue. Did not practice all week. He's still listed as questionable for whatever reason. He's supposedly a game time decision. He's probably going to get a shot in his rib if he does end up playing. See how he feels. Not really somebody I'm taking a chance on this slate overall. If he burns me, that's okay. I don't think he actually ends up playing, but I can post an update in the comments down below as well when the inactives are released. Otherwise, I do always put them out on my Twitter as well at Coach Craig Sport. Let's see. We got Dennis Gardeck. He's an edge linebacker for them, rotational guy. He's out. Rodney Hudson, the center's out once again, so could affect that offensive line once again. Justin Pugh is done for the year with his knee injury. I believe he tore his ACL. So once again, that offensive line for the Cardinals may be a issue. So maybe it makes the Saints defense a little bit better overall. They're banged up as well, though. Darrell Williams is out with his knee injury at running back. Eno Benjamin, he was listed with the foot injury. He was limited in practice technically twice this week. Monday was just an estimated practice report, but did participate fully yesterday, so no concerns with him. Probably going to be the lead running back once again tonight. And then we have Trayvon Mullen dealing with a hamstring injury, limited in practice all week, is questionable to play. We'll see if he plays or not. That could impact them just a little bit. It seems like the last couple of games they've been playing. Antonio Hamilton played a little bit last week at corner, so we'll see if it's him or Mullen. If Mullen is active, not too big a difference there, though. For the Saints, we got Michael Thomas, Jarvis Landry both out once again. Andrews Pete is out at guard. So, excuse me. So that impacts their offensive line as well. And then I believe Calvin Throckmorton. Okay, so he is questionable to play. He's been limited in practice all week. He may take that place of Andrews Pete. Otherwise, Lewis Kidd did play a little bit there last week. Undrafted free agent, I believe rookie as well. Not a guy that I'd be trying to feel comfortable behind. Adam Troutman's out with an ankle injury. More snaps for Juwan Johnson. Nick Vanette is going to be active in this game, obviously. Then Keith Kirkwood, he was the practice squad guy that got brought up last week. Apparently, they're keeping him up this week. Ankle injury, did not practice the first 2 days, limited in practice the last day. He is questionable to play. He probably be operated as their fourth wide receiver. Marshawn Lattimore is out once again with an abdomen issue. So that means Bradley Roby's probably going to take his place on the outside. Chris Harris probably plays in the slot, which isn't really a bad thing because Chris Harris is actually pretty good in the slot, or he's been throughout his career, even though he did sign with the Saints a little bit later this year. I have not dug too deep into his PFF numbers for the 2 games or game and a partial game that he's played so far this year, but did pretty well last week. Maybe that impacts Rondell Moore a little bit, but there's some other issues there with the Cardinals wide receivers, obviously. Talking about Hollywood Brown being out with the foot injury. They did trade for Robbie Anderson. McCliff Kingsbury says if he plays, he'll be very limited. I don't expect him to play. He's probably going to be inactive tonight. So we're going to see a lot of DeAndre Hopkins making his return. We're going to see Rondell Moore a lot as well. Some AJ Green, and then maybe mixing in some Greg Dortch as well. Let's see where we were at. Paulson Adebo is also questionable at corner with a knee injury. I expect him to play, but we'll just have to keep an eye out on that one. If he doesn't play, it could be a pretty good game for these Arizona wide receivers and Kyler Murray overall. Let's see where we're at. Throckmorton, we already talked about. Peyton Turner, who's missed the last 2 games with a chest injury, is questionable, so he could bolster that defensive line for the Saints. Jameis Winston and Andy Dalton both don't carry an injury designation, but it has been listed that Andy Dalton will start this game. Jameis Winston will operate as the backup. Jameis is not fully healed from his back injury at this point in time, so not too big a difference overall there. I do have in my I'm going to get rid of this and then go back over to DraftKings real quick. But in my DFS sheet for the week, where I have the Thursday night football games, the main slates, and everything else like that, I did leave Jameis on there as well, just because like you could make lineups with Jameis Winston since Andy Dalton's kind of banged up too, and say maybe Dalton gets knocked out early. That is something that could happen. Or he just plays really bad and they just put Jameis in. That's like a situation that could actually happen. Not saying it's going to happen for sure or not, though. But we're going to get into the pricing. As always, I go with the flex pricing because you're only playing one guy in that champion spot overall. I do have my notes here as well. And I'm going to bring up Run the Sims 2 real quick on the side with Firefox or with my other internet browser, just to make sure like none of the ownership drastically changed since I looked at it a couple hours ago. It may change as we get closer to lock, especially with that James Conner news overall. So first off, there is Kyler Murray at $11,200. Not a bad price tag when you think about quarterbacks of his caliber or his potential caliber. We've seen guys be $12,000, $12,200 in that quarterback spot on Showdown Slate. So definitely could be a lot worse, but still an expensive player at that. But I think there's pretty good value on this slate overall. Then we have Alvin Kamara at $10,600. I'll tell you right now, Kyler Murray and Alvin Kamara are going to be the 2 most popular players on the slate in terms of both captain percentage and flex percentage. And probably rightfully so because they're 2 of the better players on this slate overall. DeAndre Hopkins, $10,200 is a hefty price tag for a guy who hasn't played all year. He's been suspended for the first 6 games of the year. So I think he's somebody you can play. I think he might go a little bit over-owned. He might go a little bit under-owned. I really don't know at this point in time just because we haven't seen anything from him this year. There's rumors that he may be slightly limited in this game, which means he's probably not going to play every snap. He's probably going to play like 70% of snaps is kind of what I would expect, 70, 80%, probably depending on the game flow as well. And my other page is not pulling up, but at this point in time, Kyler Murray is projected for 21%. In the captain spot. DeAndre Hopkins was 9% and Alvin Kamara was 18%. So I'll tell you right now, the 3 most popular guys are going to be Kyler Murray, Alvin Kamara, and Chris Olave. Chris Olave is 15% there. Do you need to get to Chris Olave tonight in that champion spot? I don't think you necessarily need to. 15% is a lot if it actually ends up being like that. And keep in mind, these are all projections as well. So it's going to vary contest to contest. So if you're playing a single entry contest, you're probably going to see a lot more Kyler Murray in that champion spot. You're going to see a lot more Alvin Kamara in that champion spot as well. Let's see where we're at too. You might see more DeAndre Hopkins as well. You might see a little bit more Zach Ertz, kind of these guys that we feel pretty comfortably about. If you're playing in 150 max, 20 max, a little bit more casual contest, you might see some of the big names being popular, but you might also see a very good mix at that captain spot overall as well. So without going too far down that rabbit hole, we were on Hollywood Brown's obviously out. Jameis Winston, Andy Dalton, they're essentially the same salary. I think you can definitely play Andy Dalton tonight. Like I said, you could probably sneak a lineup in like a cheap one if you're playing like 150 max or something like that. With Jameis Winston, maybe slip a couple in there just in case something does end up happening. Whether Andy Dalton gets injured, God forbid, or he just doesn't play well and they feel comfortable enough flipping the switch to Jameis like for 3/4 or half the game or something like that. James Conner is kind of that big one there at $8,800. It's a little bit of a hefty price tag, especially for what he's done this year. I don't expect him to play either way. And then you also have a running back dealing with a rib injury. Running backs get hit on every single play, whether they get the carry or they're blocking. And the rib area is a very vulnerable area. So he's not somebody I'm particularly chasing. Maybe the ownership is down if it kind of looks like he's not going to play, then he does play. But personally, I'm not going there. Benjamin's at $8,200, which is essentially his replacement in this game. I have more interest in Benjamin overall. I think he's going to be the primary guy once again. We got Chris Olave, who are already talked about quite a bit. Obviously there's no Michael Thomas. There's no Jarvis Landry. There's no Adam Troutman that it affects too much overall. But Olave is going to get his target share, but I think it's still going to be spread around between him and Marquez Callaway and Tre'Quan Smith. We've never quite seen the situation play out fully because Olave missed last week too, and then the prior week Jarvis Landry, and then the prior week where it would have been like Olave, Callaway, and Smith. I believe Jarvis Landry played a little bit in that game as well. So we've never seen these three kind of play out all together. I have some interest in all three of these wide receivers, Chris Olave, Marquez Callaway, and Tre'Quan Smith. Callaway is probably my favorite of the three just because he's going to operate in that Michael Thomas, the X role in this offense overall, and he's the cheapest of the three. Juwan Johnson is another intriguing option at tight end, especially without Adam Troutman in this game. Taysom Hill's at $7,200. He carries that quarterback designation, not that it matters too much for single game. Obviously, we know the big game that he had 2 weeks ago where he scored 4 touchdowns. He is not playing a lot of offensive snaps. Maybe plays a little bit more without Troutman in this game, without some of these other guys. But if he's not scoring touchdowns, he's not really helping you. And at $7,200, that's a little bit of a hefty price tag, but you still should have a little bit of exposure to him if you're playing like 20 max, 150 max, or anything like that. But he's probably going to be more popular than I would like to play. Zach Ertz at $7,000, very fair, very respectable price tag. The Saints kind of in the middle of the pack against tight ends. I know it says second there, but they've been, they're not the greatest against tight ends, but they're not the best either. And I don't think they've faced the toughest competition so far this year. Tre'Quan Smith's kind of the interesting one here. What happens with that Arizona situation in terms of cornerbacks? Tre'Quan Smith's probably going to play the slot. If Byron Murphy stays on the outside and you get somebody else playing the slot, whether it's, Whitaker did play there a little bit earlier this year, but he's probably not going to get promoted. Isaiah Simmons has been covering the slot some, but he's a linebacker. If you put a linebacker on Tre'Quan Smith, that might be a good advantage there. Obviously, $6,200 because he did score that touchdown last week, which really boosted him up. Don't care about these other quarterbacks. We got Rondo Moore at $5,800. I went on my little Chris Harris spiel a little bit ago, but Rondo Moore has still been very, very involved in this offense, been drawing a lot of targets since he's returned, and definitely a guy that I have a lot of interest in once again tonight. He is 9% projected in that captain spot. Robbie Anderson at $5,600, you can pretty much just write off on this slate overall. Even if he does end up playing, it sounds like he's probably going to play like less than 15% of snaps. So unless he's catching a long touchdown, you're probably not going to pay off at his price tag at $5,600. Mark Ingram's $5,200. For him to really pay off, he's either got to get a touchdown, 2 touchdowns, or Alvin Kamara to get hurt. So I'm probably not looking at him too much tonight. Marquez Callaway at $4,800, definitely in play once again. Cardinals defense, I'm not too sold on the defenses in this game. They've kind of been both middle of the road at this point in time. There is opportunities there. Can't completely rule them out, especially, if you get a fumble recovery, a pick six or something like that. The kicking situation is very interesting for the Cardinals at this point in time. Matt Prater is questionable play. He's been dealing with that hip injury. They did cut Amendola earlier this week. They signed Rodrigo Blankenship to the practice squad. So there's a realistic chance that Prater does not kick in this game, and it's Blankenship. And I believe Blankenship's not on DraftKings either. I know he's definitely not on FanDuel. So he's not on the slate. Maybe if that ends up happening, they throw him on, but I'm not expecting it either way. Prater, I'm probably going to avoid at the kicker position. If you're going to play a kicker, play Will Lutz just because he's $200 cheaper and he's not dealing with an injury or has been dealing with an injury. Greg Dortch, $3,200. This is more a GPP play than anything at this point in time. There is a chance that DeAndre Hopkins and Rondo Moore just play on the outside and they just kind of don't play AJ Green as much, and then Dortch plays in the slot. That is a possibility. We saw it the one game, but that was the game that AJ Green did miss. AJ Green's not been super involved, not been super productive this year either, so we'll see what ends up happening with that. You can take shots on Dortch. You can take shots on AJ Green. They're both cheap enough where they're kind of filler spots in GPPs if you really want to do so. Juwan Johnson's kind of that same type of way, but we've seen him have productive games so far this year. Cardinals have not always been the best against tight ends in coverage. He's a pretty athletic tight end, so I would not be surprised by any means if he does end up having a good game. And even if he just has like 4 catches for 30 yards and a touchdown, $3,000, that's definitely paying off there. We have Shaheed here, who's $2,000. He's on the practice squad technically. I don't believe he's been elevated yet. He had a touchdown on a long run last week, so a little bit of explosiveness there, but probably not going to play him at all. Kirkwood, like we mentioned in the injury report, he is questionable to play. We'll see if he plays or not. If he doesn't play, then we're going to see, a Kirk Merritt or a Shaheed get called up, which should be happening pretty shortly. Trey McBride, $600. He had the one game where he had 3 catches, but since then has done nothing. Could be an opportunity for him in this game, but I'm not really banking on it. Keontae Ingram, $400. That backup running back tonight, most likely, unless James Conner plays. You can take some shots there in GPP if you really want to. Steven Anderson's just another tight end. Corey Clement, is he still active? So he got reverted to the practice squad. They have not elevated him yet. I don't think he's going to have too many touches if he does end up playing. Keep an eye out on some of these other wide receivers, maybe cheap dart throws. For the Cardinals, if Robbie Anderson is not active tonight and they promote one from the practice squad, probably would have to be Javon Wims, but he's not very good, so I probably wouldn't go there myself personally. JP Holtz and Nick Vanette are both $200. They'll both see some playing time with Adam Troutman out, but you're just hoping they get lucky and catch a touchdown at that point in time. Let's see who else we got here. Oh, they got Laquan Treadwell. I forgot about that. Kevin White played a little bit last week, but there's really not much else down here towards the bottom. So now that I kind of went through that, I know there's a couple people in here. If you guys have any questions at all, feel free to leave them in the comments. Going to go through, build some lineups real quick. I'm going to go through the ownership one more time. So what I see on the New Orleans side, we have Andy Dalton at 4% in the captain percentage, or in the captain spot, excuse me. Alvin Kamara at 18%, Chris Olave at 15%, Callaway at 1%, Traquan Smith at 2%, Taysom Hill at 2%, Will Lutz at 2%, the defense also at 2%. So that's a total aggregate ownership of 46% going to the Saints side. So a little less to the Saints side, but it's pretty close overall. It's not like a completely one-sided game in that regard. For the Cardinals, Kyler Murray is projected at 21% ownership. James Conner was projected at 6%, but I don't expect him to play. Most of that ownership is probably just going to fly right over to Eno Benjamin. DeAndre Hopkins is at 9%. Rondell Moore's at 9%. Zach Ertz is at 6%. And Prater's at 1%. And the Cardinals defense is at 2%. So an aggregate ownership going to the Cardinals side of 54% overall. In terms of the simulation that I did run earlier, I like to look at leverage plays and kind of where there's some negative leverage and where there's some leverage to be gained. I just plugged in a couple different things using Run the Sims. They have a DIY simulator. So you can go straight in, put how many plays you think each team's going to run, how many points each team's going to run. You can adjust the percentages in terms of target share, how often you think these guys are going to score touchdowns based on like receptions or carries and stuff like that too, or their percentage of their teams. Very, very good, unique tool. But just keep in mind, single game slate, you're building a story. So maybe you go and do that once and you say it's going to be a 20-17 game. Maybe you go in and say it's going to be a 24-20 game. And then maybe one of the times you go in and you say it's going to be 10-13 because Thursday Night Football has been sucking lately. There's a lot of different ways that you can do that. You can also do that via hand building as well, whether or not you want to tell a specific story. So in terms of like a cash build tonight, I'm going to start off with a cash build, I feel like, because who's the safest guy to put in that champion spot? Well, I'll tell you right now that Kyler Murray and Alvin Kamara are going to be the most popular. Probably going to be use one of them in cash, but they are expensive at the same time too. I feel like tonight in the cash builds, you might see Rondell Moore in that champion spot quite a bit. Kyler Murray and then Alvin Kamara, obviously. DeAndre Hopkins might end up there too. It could end up being a Zach Ertz too. I think Zach Ertz is maybe a little safer for cash just because you already have a little bit of lesser price tag there and you know he's going to be involved as well. You could play Andy Dalton and then you could go down to Jawan Johnson. So this is a build you could use in cash. You could also use it in a GPP type of setting. We have Rondell Moore in that champion spot. Kyler Murray, Alvin Kamara, Zach Ertz, Andy Dalton, and Jawan Johnson. So for me personally, this is more of a cash build just because of that 3-3. Those typically don't win GPPs, but that's just kind of the way it is. So we're going to clear out of this one real quick. As I mentioned, I'm a big guy for Marquez Callaway tonight. just of those 3 Saints wide receivers, he's not like super popular. He's only 1% in the champion spot. So if you're playing him, we can still play Andy Dalton alongside him. We can play Alvin Kamara alongside him. We could play, Jawan Johnson. We could play one of the other wide receivers. We could play Taysom Hill even if we really want to. So there's a lot of different options there. I think we're still going to play Kyler Murray in that type of build. And then let's just say we're going to do Will Lutz just because the ones that I have already built, I'm not playing any Will Lutz, I think. So then you get down to the last. You wanted to be a 5-1 onslaught. You could play a Chris Olave, a Taysom Hill, or a Traquan Smith if you really wanted to as well. Or you can go to the Arizona side. We can play Zach Ertz, have $600 left over on the table. We could take Zach Ertz off. We could play Rondo Moore and leave some more money on the table, make our lineup a little bit different in that regard as well. So a lot of different ways that you can do that. I know typically we have a guy that joins us in these live streams that likes to see what happens when I build with a cheaper player overall in the champion spot and then kind of go from there. I don't think there's any super dirt cheap guys worth putting in the champion spot tonight. I think the guy that I would feel the most comfortable with if I'm going to do that is going to be Jawan Johnson. I got to go back over here and do it real quick though. $4,500 in that champion spot. We're going to put Andy Dalton there. I think we're still probably going to play Alvin Kamara alongside him. And then let's just say, since we have a cheaper guy here, we're going to play Kyler Murray and we're going to play DeAndre Hopkins. We have $4,100 left over, and then we can still play like a Will Lutz in that situation. So that's one lineup that you could build if you want to put a little bit cheaper guy in that champion spot. A couple different ways that you can build this overall. Have nothing in terms of the defenses. If you really want to build that defense champion spot, go ahead and do it. I don't think that's going to be the one tonight, but I could be completely wrong as well. Let's see. We can do, so if we do Kyler Murray, let's just do him since he's the most popular. And if we play him and we play Alvin Kamara and we play DeAndre Hopkins and let's see here real quick, round up more. So we had this left over. $6,600 for 2 players. Could be a little bit interesting here. Obviously, you can't get to Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins, Rondo Moore, and Zach Ertz if you're bringing Alvin Kamara alongside. But if you drop him down to somebody else, you could definitely do it. Let's see what we got in this situation. If we play Marquez Callaway, we'd have $1,800 left over, which kind of puts us in no man land. So that's not something I'm super proud of there. But we could play a Jawan Johnson. We could play the Greg Dortch line here if we really want to, or the AJ Green. AJ Green we know is going to be on the field more, or should be on the field more, at least I should say, than Greg Dortch. So this is a way to do it. You have $1,000 left over. If you want to bump up somebody else, you can definitely do that as well. Now, let's see what happens. So Andy Dalton champion spot's an interesting one. We can play with Andy Dalton there. Maybe. If I can click the buttons. Let's see. So if we play Andy Dalton and then we want to stack him with some of his guys. So you could do an Alvin Kamara. We're going to do Traquan Smith this time just because we've been doing a lot of Marquez Callaway, and we're going to do Chris Olave. So we're going to do that one, for example. We could put Kyler Murray here. We'd have $500 left over, and then you pretty much force yourself into being Keontae Ingram or a $200 dart throw tight end if you did it that way. If we wanted to play somebody like we know DeAndre Hopkins is going to get a lot of targets or be very involved, we could do him. We could do Eno Benjamin if we really wanted to. I don't know if you want to play Eno in that one. We could play Zach Ertz. We have $4,700 left over. And then if we want to play one of the kickers, the defense, something in that area once again. Or if we go down a little bit more and we go to Rondo Moore at $5,800, then you could also play like a Mark Ingram or something if you really wanted to. We could play Mark Ingram. We could take Alvin Kamara off, and then we could play Kyler Murray if we wanted to do that as well. So we'd have Andy Dalton with 2 of his wide receivers, Kyler Murray with Rondell Moore, and then Mark Ingram saying maybe he's getting the touchdown or some of that late game run if the team's doing pretty well overall. So a couple different lineups there overall. It's an interesting slate overall. I don't have a lot of exposure to kickers or defenses today. It's kind of a weird one in that regard. I'm going to go through. I'll show some lineups that I have already built. Obviously, it's still very, very early, so inactives could change this. But if you guys find these ones helpful, maybe you like them, maybe you don't. I got to get past my NBA lineups too as well. If you guys are into NBA as well, be sure to check out my core pick videos, which I'm doing on the daily at this point in time. Obviously, it's a very small slate for NBA today at just 2 games. For the NFL lineups that I built already so far, we have DeAndre Hopkins in the champion spot, Kyler Murray alongside him, Eno Benjamin, Traquan Smith, Rondale Moore, and Jawan Johnson. So in that case, we have Hopkins with his quarterback, Benjamin getting some late run. Rondale Moore still going to get his targets and be pretty safe in that regard. Traquan Smith and Jawan Johnson as the comeback there, but saying Andy Dalton's not going to do that good overall, but Smith and Johnson can still see targets and yards. We got another Kyler Murray one in the champion spot with Alvin Kamara in the flex spot, DeAndre Hopkins, Zach Ertz, Marcus Callaway, and Keontae Ingram. I feel like that's one that I kind of talked about a little bit already. Andy Dalton in the champion spot where we have him alongside Kamara, Kyler Murray, Rondale Moore, Marcus Callaway, and Jawan Johnson. So that one's pretty similar to one that I was talking through not too long ago as well. And then the final one that I have built so far is going to be Rondale Moore in the captain spot, Kyler Murray, Alvin Kamara, Eno Benjamin, Chris Olave, and Jawan Johnson. So that's pretty similar to the first one that I built at this point in time. If anybody has any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. If you have any questions after the time the stream is done and you're rewatching it or anything else like that, I do apologize, since normally I do it typically around 6:30 Eastern, or excuse me, normally I do it around 6:30 Central Time, 7:30 Eastern Time. So definitely appreciate anybody that's already watching, but also be sure to comment on this video if you're watching it on replay. If you got any other questions, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter at Coach Craig Sport. Definitely more than willing to help you guys as much as I can. But at this point in time, I don't really have too much else here. A lot of it's going to depend on the inactives tonight. If there's any major changes, I'll try to list it in this video as well. But I don't think there's going to be anything too major. We already know Hollywood Brown's going to be out. We know Robbie Anderson's probably going to be out as well. I assume James Conner misses. If he plays, that kind of changes things and ownership around just a little bit. Let me see real quick here. If my other browser would like to open, so I could look at Run the Sims once again, just to make sure none of the ownership changed since I was first talking about it from my notes that I took a couple hours ago. So I'm just going to wait for this to load real quick and see if we can get Run the Sims up on my other browser. The only reason I don't bring it up on here is because they're not an official sponsor or anything else like that. I like to reference some of their stuff, but I don't want to give away too much of their information, since it is a site that's behind a paywall and everything else like that. But at some point in time, would like to have some type of partnership with them. Got to reach out to them a little bit more about that. And then maybe I can show you guys a little bit more of their tools in general. So I'm just pulling this up real quick. Let's see. DraftKings single game, New Orleans versus the Cardinals. So I still see 4% on Andy Dalton in the champion spot, 18% on Alvin Kamara, Chris Olave 15, Marcus Callaway 1, Traquan Smith 2, Taysom Hill is 2, and Kyler Murray's at 21 still. James Conner is still at 6. So it looks like everything's the same at this point in time. Obviously, the James Conner news is what's kind of going to shake things up overall. But I talked about Jawan Johnson being that cheap guy in the champion spot. If you want to go there, he is projected 0% ownership at this point in time. So we just call that less than 1%, or at least that's what I typically like to do in that regard. But that's pretty much what I got for this point in time. Feel free. I know a couple more people are jumping in here. If you got any comments at all before tonight's game, feel free to list them down below. If not, go back, watch the video a little bit, leave any questions that you have in the comments, and I'll get back to you as quickly as possible. But definitely appreciate everybody that's been in here. Once again, I showed a couple NBA lineups up there as well. If you're into NBA DFS content, be sure to check out my daily core pick videos as well. And then obviously check out the Patreon, patreon.com/Coach Craig Sports. There is some stuff for fantasy football there. That's the lower package. And then there's a slightly bigger donation, very small amount of money when you think about it. And I have that NFL DFS sheet on there, as well as some NBA DFS content I'll be putting up on the Patreon as well. Definitely appreciate everybody that checks it out and everybody that checked out the stream overall. But that's pretty much what I got for today. Once again, feel free to reach out if you guys need anything else at all.